are waiting for Dr. Serrano to come join us. Hopefully this time we can get some sound. Cross your fingers, cross your toes. We are live again on Facebook. We are on Instagram. Hello, my darling. It is so nice to see you. So while we're waiting, I'm curious if this is an issue that any of you, your friends, or your family are dealing with. And I feel like infertility is one of those things that nobody wants to talk about because it makes us feel some kind of a way about our own bodies and whether or not they're working properly. So I'm really excited to be able to him your questions. So if you have any, pop them in the comments. I hear sound.
Hey, we're back.
I hear you. I hear you. I'm so excited. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you as well. I don't know what happened, but we're back.
It's just Instagram being So I was thinking to myself today, and I was giggling, is there a better day than Easter Monday to talk about eggs and fertility?
You know, we never planned it this way, but I guess so. So Easter was actually yesterday here in Mexico.
Yes.
So it's today for you guys?
Well, it's Easter Sunday, but some people take the Monday as a holiday. So
Wow,
I
smart.
started Easter Monday.
That's pretty smart. So how are you doing, Jorge?
I'm amazing. How was your Easter? Your little one. Did she love the bunny?
Yes, she's not a big fan of like the big giant like the bunny like characters, but she had a great time. Unfortunately, she's in a cast right now. She had a little micro fracture, but she's doing better.
That's terrible. They are supposed to be made of rubber. They don't break.
She's gonna be fine. I'm not worried.
So I'm so excited. Speaking about children, I want to talk today about growing your family when you're struggling with infertility. So first, I'd love to start with, how do you know, Dr. Serrano, how do you know if you're struggling with fertility or if you're just hitting the right time? How long should you be trying on your own before you're looking into if your babies are working right?
You know, great question, Dory. Fertility can be, I mean, it's hard to, it even feels weird saying it, but in 2019, it's still a bit of a taboo topic. Some people bring it up, they wait years to bring it up with their doctors or with their couple. And it's sort of like one of those things that you start kind of putting to the side. So it is something that should be talked about. I mean, even when you're just looking or being healthy, doing pap smears, revisions, things like that, it's important to have a good notion of where you're at. Okay, how your ovaries are doing, which is the organ that produces eggs or follicles or ovules. They're analogous terms, and so awareness is key, just as it is in everything else. So what I tell patients is, I mean, when you've been trying 6, 9, 12 months and you're just not getting the result that you'd like, if you're counting days, if you have ovulation kits, and you're doing the bare minimum and it's not happening, it's time to talk to your doctor, okay? Because we can be talking about, I mean, a lot of different fertility problems, which we'll tackle the more common ones in a bit. But I think the very first thing to do is to get the conversation started with your GP. That's the best thing. And I'm not just talking about women. I'm talking about men as well. Because we like to think that we're all macho and nothing's ever wrong with us. That it couldn't be any more wrong. Because sometimes, you know, the woman is going through all these emotional roller coasters, and society usually pins it on women, and that, you know, they're not counting the days right, they're not using whatever methods, that they're using the ovulation kits wrong, they're not checking with their doctors, etc., etc. So sometimes it's the male's fault, so to speak, okay, but it's a male problem, and so we have to make sure that we address those things, and that it is a topic of conversation with the couple and their respective doctors. Or if you're going to a fertility center like ours, we usually touch upon both sides to make sure that we're covering all angles.
Well, and I'd love to touch on fault, because I think that's one of the hardest things if you're struggling with infertility is whose fault is it? Is it my fault? Is it his fault? Is it really anybody's fault? If you have a cold and your body isn't working properly, is that your fault? So I feel like placing blame is really hard for a lot of people. And how do you deal with that with your patients? Because I'm sure a lot of people come to you feeling like they're broken or something is wrong with them.
It is actually more common than you would imagine. And it's sad because a lot of women will come with a lot of emotional issues. And that can actually be a burden towards the procedures that we're working, the goal that we're trying to get to, which is to have her become pregnant. And so it's quite simple. It's nobody's fault. Sometimes, even when you're just talking about visiting the psychologist or the psychiatrist, I mean, sometimes the mood swings that people have are the result of a little neurotransmitter that you can't even see with your naked eye. And when you regulate it, all of a sudden everything is great. Okay. Same thing happens with fertility. Sometimes it can be a very basic issue and it can be solved with medication regimen. In other cases, well, some couples do need a little more help, like IVF or ICSI, other things that we'll touch up in a sec. But the moral of the story is don't place the blame on anything. And as men or even your partner, you have to be supportive, because we do help the LGBT community a lot as well. And so, you have to make sure that you are always telling both parties involved that it's nobody's fault, okay? And that the point here is that we're going to try to fix this regardless of where the weak link, so to speak, is.
Well, and I feel like maybe part of that is looking at it as a journey instead of a struggle. I'm going through an infertility journey as opposed to I'm struggling with infertility, because I feel like with a lot of things in life, if we focus on that end goal, there's so many places we need to stop along the way.
Exactly.
So let's talk a bit about that. What's kind of the path you take? If I were to come to you and say, hi, Dr. Serrano, I'm trying to get pregnant for the last year. I have regular periods and nothing's happening. What would step one be? What would be
Sure.
our first?
I'll tell you about that, but just to finish up on that last subject we were talking about, I just had a consultation earlier today with a woman. She's 40 or 41, and he said, you know what, doctor, I finally took the plunge to talk to a specialist about this, because we were since I'm 35, I've been trying to get pregnant, and I haven't been able to. And it's just something I've been putting off, and the fear of bringing it up with my couple, with my partner, with my husband, with my doctor, it's always been a deterrent for me. And so I finally did this, and I wish I would have done it a lot earlier. I wish I would have just started the conversation. And I tell her, yeah, well, I mean, obviously it's not the ideal scenario for you to be 35 versus 41, but we can do something about it. So that's the moral of the story. Get the conversation started. So like you were asking right now, what are the steps? So a lot of people will see us either in a magazine or in social media, or they hear about somebody that had a fertility treatment with us or another surgery. And so we usually give patients like a take-home documentation, and there it says IVF, or fertility medicine. And so patients say, hey, well, actually, I have a sister that's trying to get pregnant. Can I refer her over? And so that's usually how the conversation gets started. So we get an email of some sort or some kind of communication, and then the patient will say, I want to become pregnant. What's the first thing to do? And so the first thing that we have to establish is see the patient as a whole, okay? Not just zero in on that specifically, because we're treating a patient, not a symptom or a condition or or sort of just an IVF cycle. We have to humanize this as much as we can. can. And we can do a Skype consultation, FaceTime. We have various methods. Sometimes technology fails us like it did a while ago, but we make it work, right? So the moral of the story here is that there is no substitute to talking to a physician. You can get a lot of information from Google, from YouTube, from all over the web. But really, until you speak to a healthcare professional, you will have a better idea of what the journey, like you said, is going to be like. And so once you fill out the medical history form and you talk to one of us, then usually you're headed in the right direction, because the rest are technicalities, lab work, ultrasounds, medication, doses, regimens, protocols, what works for me, what doesn't. But that can seem overwhelming, and just saying it, I've been saying, wow, if I didn't know what that was, I'd say, wow, that's a lot. But no, actually, once you take the first step in that right direction, the rest kind of just starts settling in.
And do you test male fertility as well?
I'm sorry,
Do you male fertility as well?
Yeah,
So
usually we have a couple that comes over to see us. And just like we're going to check the female reproductive cycle at every little checkpoint, we are also going to check the male. Okay, it's called the spermogram. And so what we're basically doing is we're checking the soldiers for motility, for integrity, for everything, so that we can see if they have the appropriate characteristics to be able to penetrate the egg or the follicle in order to begin the fertilization process and yield an embryo.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about the embryos and the sperm themselves, because from my understanding, there are a few options. If they're viable or not. So let's talk a little bit about doing in vitro with donated eggs or your own eggs. What's different?
Great question. We get that asked a lot. Okay. So the first thing I want to mention is that one of the things that's characteristic about our practice is that we are 100% ethical about everything. And so if there's something that has a legal implication, we're not going to jump over that hurdle. So for instance, let's go with an extreme example for now. Sometimes we have patients that are 45 years old, okay? And let's say we do an ovarian stimulation phase and there really wasn't a lot to stimulate. So for instance, we have a case right now where the mom says, well, I have a 22-year-old daughter. Can I use her eggs and then have them reimplanted on me? Then yes, but that has to be all in writing, because you never know, Dory. And whenever you need a DNA sample and then it doesn't match up, then whoa, you can start running into a lot of problems. So that has to be in writing for us as physicians to be able to go ahead and go on with the protocol. Same thing goes with surrogacy. Some women, they don't have the appropriate conditions in their uterus to be able to carry a baby for 9 months. So they can go to a family member, neighbor, friend, but actually to be able to put it in writing as well. Because as you know, for example, this happens in the US that they kind of rent a uterus, but they go upwards of $80 to $90 to $100,000 for just that one process. But if you talk to somebody and then you get legal help to put that in writing, then that's something that it won't break your bank. I mean, because not a lot of us have 80, 90 grand just laying around. Okay, so. And that's why in Mexico, we are required to have that documentation and that paperwork in order to move forward. Now, can we kind of do it without bypassing that step? Yes. But at the end of the day, it will give you more problems, and morally and ethically, it's just wrong. So those are some of the extreme examples. And so, but it does happen a lot because unfortunately, like I said, the generation that we're in right now that we're seeing, we see a lot of women that are between 35 and 45. That's the biggest age range that we see. So the women that are on the 45 side, now a lot of women will come in and they have the preconception of, gosh, well, I'm old, it's not going to happen. That's not the case. We've been able to help women in that age range, but we have to do a thorough checkup. And then if for some reason, like I said, it can't happen, then there are ways to go around it. So as long as it is within ethical boundaries, as long as we're between the lines, we're fine doing it. But in order to know what you are a candidate for, we have to screen. We have to make sure that we talk to the donor, either for donor follicles or a donor uterus, and then give you or give the patient all the intricacies that come along with that, so that we can all be on the same page and that so that there are no unknowns.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question that's going to make you giggle, because I think the only thing I actually know about in vitro fertilization was the episode of Friends when Phoebe had her brother's babies, right?
Friends
And
family, I know exactly
they
which
just
one.
piled them all in there and hoped that they stuck and she had triplets. Do you do that? Do you put like 10 in there and just hope that something sticks?
Fairly 10. So IVF has evolved a lot since the late 90s when that Friends episode aired. But so basically what happens, I'll give you an IVF cycle very quickly in under a few minutes. So basically what happens is phase one of an IVF, in vitro fertilization, is when you do the ovarian stimulation phase. Okay, that's what we start with. And so by this point, we've done all the lab work, we've done all the ultrasounds, we've done all the testing that you can imagine. Okay, now we start giving the woman a medication, okay, to stimulate the ovaries, because every cycle the woman grows a certain amount of follicles, and then we can stimulate the ovaries a little more to produce a few more follicles, eggs.
Okay.
We can use those to our advantage. Now, there is a fine line between stimulating the ovaries and overstimulating them. Now,
okay.
Patients say, well, why don't you just give me more medication? We can't, because then you can do hyperovarian stimulation syndrome, and then that's not good news, okay? Now, but anyway, let's say we stick with a certain dose and a certain medication that we're giving to the patient. So that happens on about day 3 of the menstrual cycle. And then on day 8 of the menstrual cycle, then we usually will see the patient. This is where this is like our secret ingredient, if you will. This is where we personalize the process, and that's why we're so successful, and we're above the international average of successful pregnancy rates. And so we actually take the time to see the patient on day 8, and we can adjust the medication, bring it up, bring it down, keep it the same, okay? And so then we would be seeing the patient again on about day 12, do one last checkup before the patient ovulates, okay? So that we don't lose the follicles, and then, then everything went to waste. So there are ways to keep tabs on that. Now, we usually will schedule the patient, let's say on day 13, and then we will do what's called the follicle extraction or the egg extraction. And it's through ultrasound guidance, and it's done under a light sedation. The patient won't feel any pain at all. It's very comfortable. Some centers of the world do it without a sedation, but that's a little bit of a torture to me. And so we just make sure that it's not a traumatizing experience for the patient, so that it can be, so that there's no stress involved. Now, let's say we're talking about that 45-year-old patient. Now, let's say we extracted 4 follicles, okay? So we extract 4 follicles, and out of those, we take them to our lab, which is literally a few steps out of the OR. Everything is done in-house. And then our geneticists will test for those embryos and see what the follicles, to test their integrity and the conditions that they're under. So we keep them in an incubator that basically mimics physiological conditions. And then what we do is we take the sperm sample from the husband or from the partner, and then we do the fertilization in lab. And so that's the IVF process. And so 36 hours after that, or 40 hours, give or take, depending what the geneticist says, then we can actually take those embryos now and then reimplant them into the woman, into the uterus. Now, there are a few things you can do beforehand. So especially this happens with younger couples, that they say, well, I want only men, or I want only boys or only girls, or whatever the couple wants. You can do something that's called a PGD, or pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. This is great not only to see gender, but it does help with gender selection. And you can also check for common conditions that may run in the family, like cystic fibrosis, like Down syndrome, uh, and other conditions that just might run in the family that the patients know that they may be carriers for, that they're X-linked or Y-linked. So these are more genetic terms that some people may hear them and know what I'm talking about. But if there is the slight suspicion that you might be a carrier for an important condition, this is the time to test for it, because some patients say, well, I'm in my 40s. I don't know if I have the strength to, raise a child that needs a lot more of my attention. And so it's basically just an awareness tool. It's not that we're playing God or anything like that. It's an awareness tool. And so a lot of patients just want to know that, sometimes even to prepare, just to know what there can be, what to be expected when their baby is born. Now, when we transfer anywhere from 4 to 5 embryos or 6, depending upon the case, yes, you can have multiple pregnancies. Okay, not saying that if you reintroduce 6 embryos that you're going to have all 6 of them, but chances are if you transfer 4, 5, or 6 embryos, you're going to have 1 successful pregnancy. But there are cases where we do have twins. So I always tell patients you have to be prepared.
Well, and I think that would be exciting, but it might be scary too, especially if you were in your 40s. And I do see the reason for the medical testing. When I was with my son at 22 and they said, do you want to do that test? I said, it doesn't really matter what happens. But if I were to have a child now in my 40s, there's a difference between knowing, okay, I raised that child and it'll be done at 60. Yay me. And then knowing that you're going to have an adult child like my brother that I already care for, and that's a lifetime commitment. And I know what that is because Jacob is 3 years old forever. So for me, I always, raise a special needs adult. I certainly wouldn't want to bring that again. And so I appreciate that testing. So my next question would be, now, I don't even know if this is possible. I'm going to ask you a funny one. Because this was something I always thought of when I was young. And we had talked a little bit about same-sex couples. And I don't know if the technology even exists yet. But can you take the DNA genetic material from one egg and another egg? Is that something that's possible? Or are they able to do that yet?
No. So we do need a sperm to fertilize, because that would be saying like, if a woman would have 2 eggs in one cycle that they can kind of join and then yield an embryo. So no, that's not, we do need genetic material from a sperm. Now, okay. Something that happens, for example, when we have 2 women that come over to see us, sometimes we take the follicles from one woman and we transplant it to the other woman so that they both feel a part of the. Obviously we have donor sperm, but they both took part in the process, and that gives them a lot of satisfaction.
Well, and I think that that's an amazing opportunity that you could, take her egg and then carry the baby so that it's still both your baby. Now, here's a question. How do you deal with that? Because I feel like a lot of people struggle not only with infertility, but if genetically it's not theirs. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with that when a couple comes to you and you've gotten through the thing and you realize that one or both of the partners is not viable?
Great question. So that's where the pre-implantation genetic diagnosis comes into play, or PGD. So when a couple knows that they have a genetic predisposition to something that might lower their percentages or their chances of becoming pregnant, that's where you almost always have to do the PGD. Yes, okay. It is an expensive test, but it used to be $10,000, $20,000 a few years ago. Now it's a lot more readily available. But for couples that know they're carriers, it's almost a must that you have to do it. Okay. Now, when when you know there is, and maybe this is what you were trying to ask, if there is a sterility problem, like for example, if you have a male female that come in and uh, the woman is infertile, well then yes, we do have to resort forcibly to the eggs or the follicles of somebody else, and then we can implant them in her uterus. So that's why these consultations and starting the conversation with your doctor is a must. Because even if the male is infertile, for example, we have cases where we've had males that have 0.00 count of sperm, but we're able to actually go in to the testes and do a biopsy. And so we can actually extract genetic material from there, and then we can do a procedure called ICSI, or intracytoplasmic sperm injection, where we literally take a little tweezer, so to speak, and we put that genetic material, that male genetic material, into like a needle tip, and we inject it into the egg. Okay, that's all
Okay.
the lab, and so therefore we can begin the fertilization process. Okay, now those are a little more. They're not so common, the cases that we see like that, but we do see them.
Okay. Now, is there kind of a cap age that you would say, you know what, I appreciate it and I'm sorry for your struggle, but you've waited too long? Because I know a lot of people will wait 5, 6, 8, 10 years and then say, you know what, I'm at the end. I don't have any other options. I really want to have a baby. Or is that subjective to health?
It is. It is, Dory. I hate saying, you know what, after 45, you're not a candidate. I know some people will say that. I like to always just, I mean, we don't charge for the online consultations because it's almost like I hate calling it this, but to screen to say, well, are you a candidate or not? I mean, we won't make you lose more time or resources if you're not a candidate. And so, but there's no way to know that unless you speak to us, right? And so, or to any fertility practice in the world. So I would say that if somebody's having a problem with this, go for it. You know, contact us or your doctor and say, hey, do you feel I would be a good candidate? Now, one of the best things you can do is just ask your doctor for a test of what's called anti-Mullerian hormone, or AMH. And so
Okay.
Mullerian hormone is basically it's one of the better parameters that we will have in order to say, uh, yes, you're a great candidate, or you know what, your values are low, and you might want to consider egg donation or undergo a cycle, knowing that we're going to be climbing a very steep mountain.
Nice. Now, another question that made me think of is, do you guys do egg harvesting? I know what a lot of women do is they have their eggs harvested when they're young, if they know that, you know, they might want to wait 10 years before they have children.
We have a full fertility lab, and so we actually have males freeze their sperm sample as well. So we have some patient males that are, I don't know, they're deep sea divers, or you know, they have higher risk professions, and they will just store a sample in our lab. And so it is very doable, and it's a lot more within reach than people would think about. So it is very doable. But eggs, same thing, you know. So some women that are even younger are now saying, well, I know that my mom or my aunt had problems conceiving, so I just kind of want to make sure that I have a backup in case that were needed. And so when women are young, sometimes, I mean, they don't even need a stimulation. We can just actually do an extraction without getting any medication, and then harvest those. Obviously, with patient consent forms, and knowing that at a certain point, they say, well, you know what, I don't want any more kids. I want to make sure that those follicles are disposed of, and that's something, obviously, we do perform with the highest scrutiny.
Excellent. So it's about time to wrap up. I see if you have anything going on in the next weeks that we need to follow for.
Well, I mean, I'd say that in the spirit of doing this, I would definitely say, I mean, I don't think we have something. Well, actually, no, I'm wrong here. I think there's something published on social media. I don't have the exact numbers, uh,
Okay.
but if people are coming based off of this conversation, I'll try to put my word in there to do a little bit of a better consideration. I'll have the girls work something out that, you know, if something comes out of this. Uh, live feed with you and somebody is interested in doing this and they actually pursue the process, we can do something for them. As you know, I really don't get involved in the financial parts of things, but I mean, yeah, we would definitely be more than willing to help, because to begin with, I mean, these procedures are uh, they're expensive to begin with, especially, in the US and Canada. They can run upwards of $25,000 or more, okay,
Yeah.
depending on the amount of medication that you use. But I mean, just by having the procedure here, you do save a lot of money just even with no considerations. But we do, and we have the highest technology available when it comes to the machinery that we use. So you can even jump on Instagram or Facebook and see some of the videos of our lab, and you're going to say, "Wow, that this is a state of the art facility." So, uh, but we are friends of Dory, and so we love to help your fan base as well.
And honestly, guys, I personally wouldn't recommend going anywhere else. I've sent my friends and my family to meet you, but even from the first time I met you, there was ever any procedure of any kind I need to have done, I wouldn't go anywhere else. I've never seen medical treatment where they treat you like family, and you guys absolutely blew me away. So if you guys are curious, make sure you ask for more information and stay in touch, and feel free to shoot me messages as well if you guys are shy and you have questions you want to ask. I can be that through person for you too, but you're always best to go to the source, and don't leave it too long. Don't wait 5 or 10 years. If you're struggling, talk about it now.
Yes, I'll end with basically saying that I love the fertility field because there's a lot of gratification behind it. Yes, there are ups and downs, but usually when we do things in a very detail-oriented process, because sometimes we get patients that literally fly in and they say, "Hey, I want to become pregnant tomorrow," and so I mean, you have to kind of do things on a step-by-step basis. And now,
Yeah.
as you know, we have a large Canadian base. And one of the more gratifying things, I mean, obviously, thank you for your kind, beautiful words. I mean, they mean a lot. Uh, but the fact that patients, after they have procedures, come to see us on a yearly basis, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about my other colleagues at Bahamed as well, that we take great pride in giving a good attention to our patients, that they say, "You know what, I'll just come back next year for my yearly checkup with you guys," and they just have that trust instilled in us. And so we do take a lot of pride in that and a lot of responsibility, because when people trust you with their health, it's not just about, "Oh, that feels great." There is a lot of responsibility that goes on our backs. And so uh, we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to respond to that trust given to us by our patients. And so when it comes to the fertility world, just like you said, don't wait too long, because unfortunately, they have a biological clock, like a lot of people refer to, but it runs like a Swiss clock. Okay, every month that passes is one less follicle or a few couple of follicles that you're never going to have ever again. And so I'll leave patients with that. Think about it. It's food for thought, and you have nothing to lose with going through with a consultation. It's actually more enlightening than people think. It's not a pressure sale. Whenever people talk to me or any other physician here, we don't even talk about a dollar or a cent. We're only talking about medical issues, and so in order for the environment to stay very respectful and very trustworthy, and so patients don't feel like they're being sold a used car.
Yes. And I think that's my favorite thing about you, to be honest with you, is just the care that you guys take and the aftercare you put into it. It's almost 8 years ago that I had my surgery, and we've still kept in regular contact. So if you guys are
decade, we're gonna have to do something special for the 10-year anniversary.
yes, we will. We'll have that. You have an amazing day. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye, Jorge, and to all your fan base, we'll be in touch.
What else you do?
I'm sorry?
I said, let's talk next month about another
Course,
that you
more than happy to do so. We love hanging out with you, Dory. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Take care. Stay smiling. Bye now.
Bye.